And so you can just go there and watch this video.
Okay, yeah. Can you pull it up for us and not put it on camera? And actually, instead of doing a cut in, I'll take this moment to say to our YouTube reviewers, told you to come to this timestamp because we'll put that at the front. Everything discussed today is in an educational context, a historical telling showing absolutely no violent images of any kind. It is strictly someone who was there, Ephraim, taking us through what happened, and it falls completely under the correct guidelines of full monetization on YouTube. Thank you. Have a great day. Anyway, all right, let's pull up this video, and while you and I are watching this, can you just walk me through what's going on here and walk through our audience what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the old video there.
Yeah. Do we have the...
There we go. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
All right. So the video starts off. So let me give a little context before the video starts. So,
yeah. Who's videoing this, by the way?
Yeah. So what's going on is the ISIS. The reason we didn't just pound them into dust with airstrikes is because what they would do is they would force the civilians to stay with them because they know that Western forces and the Iraqi forces don't want civilian casualties. We don't want to hurt anybody. Right. So regardless of what the news tells you, we are, and as my story from earlier demonstrates, like we are trained, do not hurt civilians. Like, you know.
Yes.
So anyway, but they keep the civilians with them because they know that we're not just going to hit them with a 2,000-pound JDAM and then they're all dead. So they keep the civilians with them as hostages. And so in this particular place, a group of about, I don't know how many civilians ran away, but it was a lot. May have been 500, I don't know. Because 200 of them were slaughtered in the street. That doesn't include the wounded. 200 people were killed right in front of ISIS headquarters as this massive group of people all got up and left at the same time. So these Iraqi civilians who are tired of being around ISIS, they want to get away. They want to get their kids to safety. So they're grabbing their kids and they're taking a backpack and they're running. So as they cross this, it was maybe like a 6-lane highway, like main highway there in Mosul.
What used to be a 6-lane
yeah,
highway.
so it just looks like rubble, but yeah, it used to be like a large street. ISIS just gunned them all down, and so there's literally piles of bodies where people are getting shot, falling down, other people climbing over those bodies, getting shot, falling on top of those bodies, more people trying to climb over those bodies, getting shot, and so there's like literally a pile of bodies in one spot of like 25 people. There were women, kids. 14-year-old girls, saw a little baby, maybe 6 months old. Its head was caved in. It hadn't been shot. Both of its parents had been shot in the back. It was obvious what had happened. So the mother had been shot. The father was carrying the baby. The father had been shot in the back, fell forward, and so then the baby's head was cracked open on the rubble when the father fell forward. And that was maybe 6 or 7 feet away from the corner that they needed to turn to get to safety.
Do you have any moment to during this to process that and take in what you're seeing?
When you're in these situations, your mind is intentionally numb. You have to deal with it later. You can't sit there and be like, "Oh, how do I feel about this?" Right. No, it doesn't matter. We've got a job to do, and I'll deal with it later. So you turn off that part of your brain.
Turn it off.
You just turn it off. You just turn off that part of your brain. And you still care, that there's a part of it that still bleeds through, but in those moments, you can't be sitting there thinking about, how do I feel about this?
Yeah.
So ISIS guns down like 200 people in the street, and in the pile of, we were some of the first guys on the scene to see what had happened. And when we got on scene and we were looking through the buildings and through some of the safe angles to see what had happened, we noticed a little girl alive in the pile of bodies, and she's just sitting there like in shock. And we believe she's hiding under her dead mother. She puts her mother's like hijab like over her to like hide herself from the sun. Now keep in mind it's Mosul in June. And it's like 110, 115, 120 degrees. You're literally getting baked alive sitting out there. And this had happened the day before we showed up on scene. So this little girl, she's laying out there. She's totally in shock, has no idea what's going on. She's 50 to 75 meters away from ISIS headquarters, just laying in this pile of bodies. And so we all looked at each other and we're like, yeah, we got to go. We got to do something here.
Got to get her.
Yeah, we had no choice. We can't wait till night. We got to go now. Otherwise, this girl, because this was like early in the morning when we found. I was like, she's not going to survive the afternoon heat. She's going to die. And so we contacted we contacted the U.S. military, and basically we're like, hey, put a drone overhead. You guys need to see this. So the U.S. military actually put a drone overhead, and they were watching this.
How'd you contact them?
The other guys who were like sort of like leading the group of volunteers who've been there longer, they basically just already had the numbers. So people like, hey, like we're here, just so you guys know, you know. So they were able to,
that.
yeah, just kind of keep
the
communication
iPhone and be like, let's go, fam.
That's literally what it was. Yeah, like here's my iPhone. Like, hey, let me text you this coordinates. Put a drone overhead. That's exactly how it worked.
God bless Lockheed Martin, baby. Let's go.
Yeah. So the drone shows up overhead. The U.S. military sees what's going on, and so they're like, cool, we can give you guys a smoke screen. That was all we can do. Like, we can give you guys a smoke screen if you guys are going to go do a mission to get civilians out of here. So the U.S. military made a call, and they started firing using artillery. They started firing white phosphorus, which was detonating in the air and was building up this like smoke screen in front of ISIS. And then the Iraqi army are the ones actually driving the tank that you see in the video. So that's an American M1 Abrams tank, but that's actually a jet engine on the back of these things. They're pretty cool. But the Iraqi army is driving that. And then that was it. So we had a tank, a smoke screen, and then there was like 4 or 5 of us who were going to go on this mission to get this little girl. And so the U.S. military starts firing this white phosphorus, giving a little bit of a smoke screen. It was still not that great. We get behind the Iraqi army tank, drives out into the middle of the road. We get behind it, and it just drives straight behind enemy lines, right there, right up to ISIS's front door. ISIS immediately starts opening fire. Machine guns, rockets, mortars are going off, landing behind us because we're moving forward. They're trying to walk their mortars in on us, but we're still moving forward toward them, so they're landing behind us. And we're literally stepping over the bodies of the dead as we're trying to get into position. We finally get into position, and then this is where the video starts. And myself and my buddy Sky there on the left, and this is Dave on the right. We gave covering fire, and so at this point, Dave gets ready.
The little girl's like right over there, right?
Yeah. So I pop out from behind the tank. ISIS is like 50 meters away. We're dumping rounds point blank right into their position. My buddy Sky there, he's dumping rounds right in their position as well. Dave runs out, grabs a little girl, comes back, gets behind the tank.
Wow.
I thought he was shot, so I'm like, hey, what's up? Are you all right? Because he fell down after he picked up the girl.
But he was good.
Yeah, he was good. He's totally fine. And so then we start moving back toward Iraqi army lines, and there were some war correspondents there who were filming this, and we didn't know that they were filming at the time.
And that's you in front of that tank.
That's me to the right there, yeah. And so
this
then
footage
we're
is
mopping back, and then boom, I get shot. So we don't have the audio on, but there's a burst of machine gun fire comes in, and I get shot through the right calf. I fall down.
And you get right
the tank.
up.
Well, because the tank. So yeah, if you see the video, the tank is about to run me over. And I have no choice. At that point, I didn't know if my leg was going to stay intact or not.
Is it all adrenaline? Like, are you not feeling a lot of pain because adrenaline's going?
At this exact moment, I'm not feeling pain just yet. And so then this part of the video, there's another angle from another guy who was videoing, and so you can see the blood pumping out of my right leg there. And we're waving. We're telling the Iraqi army, we're like, hey guys, send a Humvee. We need a Humvee to come across the open here and come get us. And nobody was coming. And I was like, all right. Dude. I have to run across the street to deliver this message. Otherwise, we're all going to die.
No, you got to hobble across the street.
Yeah.
Look at your calf, bro.
Yeah. So
if you haven't checked out this video yourself, you need to check this out. Steven Spielberg could work his whole career to get footage like this and never be able to capture. This is unbelievable.
So yeah. So then I run across the street at that point, and I'm screaming for a Humvee as I'm running. I'm like, Humvee, Humvee, in case I get shot. ISIS, they're shooting at me. And again, if you watch the video, you can hear the noise of the snaps going by me as ISIS guys, they could see me, and they're shooting at me. Luckily, I make it across the street. I pass the word to get a Humvee. I see them get into action to move a Humvee to go get the rest of the team. And the Humvee went out there, got the little girl and the rest of the team, and made it across the opening there. Because if they had tried to move across while carrying her, they would have all got gunned down.
Yeah.
You had one shot at running across the open and not getting hit. And so if they had then gone, because like now ISIS is looking at that spot. So I was able to get through that because they weren't necessarily watching that. So
At what point does the adrenaline leave and you start to feel pain? Because like a calf is a horrible place to get shot.
Yeah,
it's a painful place.
Yeah, not the deal.
Not that I have experience, but
yeah. No, I actually the worst pain was as soon as I passed the word that the Humvee, I realized that they were getting the Humvee going. I was like, okay, cool, mission complete on my end. There were other medics there, and they just immediately jumped on top of me, cut off part of my pant leg, and started twisting iodine-soaked gauze into both of the holes in my leg, and that was insanely painful.
Had it hit the bone? Or
No,
was it just
no.
Oh, that's good.
So I got extremely excessively lucky. It was a bullet through and through, just meat, no bone. If it had hit the bone, I probably would have died because
The blood?
no, it would have. I wouldn't have been able to move. I would have had to crawl out of there, right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have been able to move fast enough. I probably would have ended up getting shot. And yeah, so then this is like where things get weird too. Talking about just all the different volunteers and stuff that are there. So I end up being taken back to a mosque that's being used as a clinic by the Iraqi army. And so I'm being treated by, get this, Iraqi army medics, like actual like doctors. There were some guys like high level officers. Yeah, who are actual doctors. Okay. Yeah.
Just making sure.
Yeah. No, like really great guys. So Muslim Iraqi doctors who are officers in the military and Mennonite nurses in their blue and like the blue dresses and the hair buns and all that. Believe it or not. Shout out to Rhonda. She's awesome. Shout out to Rhonda and Daryl. Really cool. I don't mean this as a joke. I honestly don't know if they watch YouTube or not. But yeah, so there was like a Mennonite charity that was out there doing medical work.
What a combo.
They would not carry weapons. They were like, nope, we're total pacifists. Like, we're not going to carry weapons. We're not going to touch weapons. But they're up there, mortars going off. And yeah, so it's like I have this like Iraqi guy named Mohammed and then Rhonda from Pennsylvania. And they're the ones, you know.
Yo, mad respect to them. Wrong place to be a pacifist, but mad respect.
Yeah, nothing but respect for them. They were really wonderful. But like that was just the bizarre nature of where I was. And then so that day I ended up riding with the Mennonites back up to Erbil to
safety.
To safety.
Yeah.
It's safe. It's as safe as realistically can be. I went to a hospital there in Erbil, and I had to spend the night in a ward filled with Peshmerga, Kurdish Peshmerga fighters who'd all been wounded in the war. And so I had to spend one night there with them. And so I'm in the only empty bed down at the end of this dark sort of room. There's maybe 40, 50 guys, wounded soldiers in this ward. And so after visiting hours, they turn off all the lights and it's time, until the next morning. There's still doctors and stuff on staff, but it's sleep time. And in the dark, in the pitch dark, I'm laying there alone. No one there speaks English. I'm just laying there alone, and the screaming from these wounded guys in the middle of the night is something I'll never forget. These guys were screaming for their mothers, weeping in agony. The guys who'd been much more severely wounded than me. The guys who'd been burned, guys who'd been shot in the hip, guys with horrible, horrible injuries. Mine was very minor compared to these guys. So I spent a night just listening to screaming in the dark. And then in the middle of the night, I'm laying there, and I'm at the farthest bed, all the way deep in the ward, and away from the door. So in the middle of the night, at some point, I don't know what time, the door opens, and a guy walks in a suit, and he has a flashlight and a file, and he starts walking person to person and flashing and shining the flashlight on their face, going person to person. And I don't know how, some weird sixth sense, he must have like known that I was looking at him. So he stops, and then he just shines the light all the way down at the end, right on my face. The light stays on my face, and he just walks straight up to me. And I'm like, okay, this isn't cool. Like, is this some assassin going to take me? Like, I don't know. Like what the hell is this?
Sounds like the Men in Black.
Yeah. So I'm like, what is this? So this guy comes up to me, and he speaks broken English, and he's from Kurdish intelligence. And he's like, I need to talk to you.
Ooh.
And he's like, who are you? And so we sit there and have a conversation. Long story short, he was concerned that I was ISIS. The reason for that is here's why. I'm a white Westerner with a beard. The only guys with beards were ISIS. And so I was like, I was not with the U.S. military. They're like, so he was coming to make sure that I wasn't ISIS. And so he and I had a conversation. I just explained everything. I opened up my phone, showed him the photos. And after the first like 5 minutes, he like relaxed and was like, okay.
Did he have a gun in your face for the first
time?
He
did not, but he had a pistol on his hip. Yeah. But I was also just laying in
Start
bed.
at the very beginning.
Yeah. Don't leave anything out. Yeah. So I basically had a 1 hour podcast with this intel agent right there. Told him the same story.
Should have recorded it.
Yeah, it would have been great. And so then he was like, awesome. And then at the end, he was just like, thank you for helping my people.
Yeah.
And walked out.
That was pretty crazy.
And that was it. And then, a couple weeks later, I flew into Chicago and my parents picked me up at the airport.
Dude, had you ever done any work with the Kurds during any deployments? I guess you kind of didn't because you were in Afghanistan.
I'd never been to Iraq during my time in the military.
Yeah.
I never got to work directly with the Kurds or Peshmerga or anything like that. So actually the next morning, the Kurdish doctors, they were going to do a debridement on my leg. And basically all that means is they're going to cut away all the dead flesh from the burn. Because like when the bullet goes through you, it burns. And then little chunks of flesh don't get blood flow to them, so they die, right? And so you have like all this rotting flesh if they don't cut it all off. So they have to cut off more stuff. Yeah, so good times. So they bring me into the room. They start kind of get me ready. They're going to put me under with some painkiller sometimes, some sort of anesthesia, general anesthesia that was kind of make me go unconscious or something. As they're doing it, they were like asking me who I was and like, what are you doing? And I gave them like a 30-second version, like, oh, I'm here and I'm doing this. And they were like, oh, you're Peshmerga. And I was like, no, I didn't work with the Peshmerga. I was only with the Iraqi army. And I was like, I know the difference. I was like, no, and they were like, Peshmerga means those who face death. You are Peshmerga. Thank you for coming here and helping our people. And there was 4 medical staff there. Each one of them reached out and like touched me and said, thank you.
Wow.
And then they put me under and did the debridement. And then,
wow.
Yeah. So they were like, amazing. No, you're a Peshmerga. You face death.
Yeah. The Kurds are so fascinating to me. They come up on so many different podcasts because you got this group of like 35 million people. They don't have a country, but they do. They just don't have borders, right? They have their own military. They have their own intelligence. They have their own system. It's not like, the way I understand it, it's not like in Iraq they're paying taxes to Iraq, or they're paying. I mean, I'm sure there's some ways they're doing that, but like it's not like they're a citizen of those countries, and they're also like this amazing ally of the United States and all our stuff over there. Yet we haven't supported them in actually getting bored. It's so strange to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of that just goes back to the history of, and I'm not an expert on this by any means, but it just goes back to the history of people who are not from the region drawing arbitrary lines, and it's like, come on now. I think some of that is a little bit of that is intentional, because they want to keep places destabilized. That way they don't become great powers. That's a big reason. The other reason is just total incompetence, and people are just fools, and it's just a bunch of dudes sitting in a room going like, well, yeah, let's draw a line here, and like I've got other things to do. You know, so let's just draw the line there. That sounds good at the end of the meeting, right? And so then now there's war for generations in these places. I think that's unfortunately how a lot of this stuff happens.
I think that's a good point. Like there's a lot of back office quarterbacking that seems to happen in our government. There's a line I'm thinking of that a recent podcast my buddy Danny Jones did. He's got a great show, and he did this sit down with Andy Bustamante, who's been on his show for a long time, has been on my show a bunch, CIA guy, and John Kiriakou, who was a very high-level CIA guy who ended up, long story short, CIA ended up sending him to prison for 23 months for, it had to do with like the torture stuff. He was against it. Then they tried to pin it on him, that whole thing.
Wow.
But like really interesting podcast. And there were so many good stories in there. One of them that John was saying, because again, like he was this is the guy who took down Abu Zubaydah. Like he was a big time spy for CIA. He was talking about, I think it was a country in Africa. Maybe it was the Congo. I think it was, no, it might have been Sudan, one of them. But he was talking about a conversation he had with one of their high-level government officials and trying to get him to understand the United States position and go along with what was going to be good for them or whatever. And more importantly, keep them from some of the dealings they were going to be doing with Russians at the time. And the guy looked at him and said, "You come in here and you offer us democracy. The Russians offer us food." And it just hit him like, oh shit, yeah, we just have this idea of like, this is a great idea. It's going to be good for you, like a used car salesman or whatever. And like, maybe it could be, but they're not, the idea is actually simpler. They want to eat. They want sustenance for their citizens and stuff. And so I feel like a lot of the things we do around the world, it was just a very good symbol of like, you know, we're constantly trying to spread democracy or like solve these problems that sometimes don't even exist in some ways with what we're, it's like square peg and round hole, if you will. And in reality, there's just basic things people want. And if we could put our heads together, I don't know, and like think about it that way, maybe we could deliver more and you could make small steps towards better alliances and more stabilizations, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a great lack of ignorance in sort of U.S. culture in a way. And I think a lot of it has to do with geography. So Americans, we have Canada to the north, Mexico to the south. Everybody loves Mexican food. You know, Canadians are like our cousins, you know, and that's it. Whereas if you're a European, you are surrounded by a bunch of other countries. You can go on an 8-hour road trip and hit 7 countries if you want to, you know, in certain areas, right? And so they're much more aware of different cultures, different languages, and how their actions affect other people. Yes. And I think that, yeah, as just as a culture, we don't really think in those terms, and that's something that I think we really need to fix. I think a lot of times people don't understand history; they don't understand these different conflicts and things that are happening. And yeah, I think that's why like podcasts like this are great, so we can dive into some of those particulars and at least make people aware of it, and then they can do some research on their own and yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And yeah, if podcasts like this can play a small role in that, that's amazing. You know, I think part of it, unfortunately, like everything else, has to do with experience though too. Like to take your geography example even one step farther, I always say pretty often, it's like we've never really been invaded and it shows. Right? Like 1812, War 1812, we got invaded. And yes, we had terrorist attacks in 2001 and 1941, of course. But I mean like a full scale, like military coming in here and doing something, you know, we don't really know that because we do get to be the pond across the way, right? Or across the pond from all the other land. And when you look at other countries around the world, like you said, a lot of them, they all have borders with each other. There's conflicts, there's cultural conflicts, there's things that have led to war, there's recent history of war. And like they have an understanding of how quickly that can suddenly be a problem. And I worry about that here because I don't want it. You had talked about this theme early on in this podcast a little bit, but to go back to it, I don't want it to take a fucking 9/11, which happened less than a mile from here, for people to be like, oh, we're all on the same team, right? Like it shouldn't have to take that. But we end up getting into these comfortable times where everyone then decides the stupidest shit to fight over, that then, you know, unfortunately, it does take something like that happening for people to realize how quickly it can all be taken away.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually one of the projects, so again, fast forwarding a little bit in sort of my life story. So I'm currently spending a year at Harvard University. I'm getting an MPA, so it's a sort of Harvard. Yeah,
Harvard,
I'm working on my British accent. Harvard, working on my posh. Yeah. So I just completed the summer term, and I've got 2 more semesters that you have to do at more than full time in order to knock out this degree in a year. And so one of the projects that I'm actually working on, it's something I'm building. It's called the Overwatch, and it's going to be it is an email based sort of newsletter that summarizes all of the things that are going on in the world of armed conflicts and international affairs. So it's sort of like a Morning Brew or the Hustle, but focused on armed conflicts and what's going on around the world. Because for one, I see all the time. People will say, I'll talk to them about the war in Burma, or they'll talk to them about other places I've been to, and they'll say, "I've never heard about this. How come nobody talks about this?" Well, the reality is, people do talk about this. There actually are journalists covering, what's going on in Africa or Europe or in Burma and whatnot. But the problem is, these articles come out, these videos come out, and then they immediately get swallowed in the news feed by the latest entertainment gossip and the latest, whatever, Trump and Harris going at each other, whatever, right? And so these very important stories just get buried. And so I've started this thing called the Overwatch, and basically it's a once a week email where we summarize like anywhere from like 10 to 15 of major events that have happened that week related to armed conflicts and government and things like that. So this is a project of mine that I'm going to focus on building up more and more over the course of this year at Harvard, and eventually, we'll probably expand it and things like that. But the idea is, in this newsletter, we're not just putting sort of a quick blurb of what's going on. That's sort of the basis of it, right? So like, here's a story, here's like 3 sentences, just a quick overview of like what's happening, let's say in Haiti, right? But then within there, we're going to put links, so you can click on this link, and it's going to say, hey, here's an overview of what's going on in Haiti. Here's the summary of like the PNH and G9 going at each other. You're like, okay, well, what is that? Well, PNH is Haitian National Police, and G9 is the group of gangs, right? So you can just click on that, and you're like, okay, cool. Here's 200 words. Explain sort of what that is. And the idea is that over time, eventually, you don't have to click those links anymore. You just kind of get the you understand it as you read it. Like or in Burma, like, oh yeah, the KNLA and the SAC are in a battle right now. And you're like, well, what does that mean? And how, like, what is, like, who cares? Like, where is that and what's going on, right? And so we explain that kind of stuff on these additional links. And so it's news with context. It's not really news. It's more like world events with context. Yes. And so we want people to understand history, understand like what's going on. So you're learning the news as you're reading it, as opposed to just because it's a lot of times I'll see an article that comes through and I'm like, I don't know what that acronym means. And I'm like, wait, what's going on in Ethiopia? And like, what is the Tigray region? And like, why? And it's like, this is the world that I live in. Like, I was a SEAL, and I'm getting an MPA at Harvard. And like, I still like, there's so many things I don't know. And I want to make sure that I know these things. And so anyway, I'm building, this thing called the Overwatch.
That's very cool, man.
Yeah. It's called the overwatch.co is the website, and it's free. People can just go sign up for it. Just drop your email in there and unsubscribe anytime, obviously.
And so you have people who obviously are going to be writing that with you and stuff too. Because here's the other really difficult part for anyone who would do something like that. You also got to figure out what the best information coming from the ground is too, right? Because you're not there in all these things. Right. And we know how one thing that all sides of war have in common is that there's always some level of like slanting it towards our side.
Yeah, for sure.
No matter what.
For sure. So one of the ways we're going to deal with that is when first of all, we're going to try to pull the most reputable sources as possible. So we scour like many websites, and we have some technology that helps us do that. So that's one. And I was actually thinking it'd be actually almost we might do this possibly in the future. We might even do a segment where we kind of show like an actual piece of propaganda, and we're like, hey, this is Burma Army propaganda. And like we show that like this article was written by people who are associated with, so people can kind of see that, or like this is Russian propaganda, and kind of like exposing what some of these things are. The idea of what we're doing is the intention is not to sway people in one way or the other. It's just, here's the groups, here's what they're fighting about. Obviously, if it's something written by Al Jazeera versus Israeli Times, and it's and it's something to do with the Middle East, obviously there's going to be a slant there.
Yes.
And there's nothing we can do to pull away from that. So we try to find the best reputable sources, or at least put two links there so people can kind of see what's going on. Is the general idea.
Overwatch.co.
Overwatch, the Overwatch.co.
The Overwatch.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. I like that.
Yeah, so that's something I'm working on. Because like even my work with Stronghold, I'm out there
doing your foundation.
My foundation. I guess we can kind of just dive into that at this point.
Yeah, actually, maybe the storytelling of it would help people. So you get injured in Mosul, you recover in the hospital. As you said, you flew back to Chicago. You had still been active military technically when you flew over there, so it's not like you had this foundation yet. When was the actual foundation born?
The actual foundation itself was born 2018. So the next year is
Okay.
when the paperwork was filed. So middle of so June 2017, I get back to the U.S. And then at the end of the year, I was actually in Thailand doing kickboxing. I was at a kickboxing camp for a month, just doing kickboxing, and I was using it just to get back in shape and everything. And then when I was there, basically I was invited by some people in Burma, and they said, "Hey, like we understand your background. The war in Burma." In our area is going to kick off again. At the time there was a ceasefire in the eastern part of Burma.
Okay.
And they were like, "Hey, can you come help us? We need help."
And this is where it all started for you.
This is where it had started ideologically
yes.
years prior, and then
Yes.
now I'm being asked to come in, and I just so happened to be there, and I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And so I ended up going into Burma and working with I work with the Karen tribe. And my first trip in, I ended up spending like 3 weeks deep in the jungle, just kind of getting to know these guys, seeing what I could do to help them. And it was basically frontline mentorship and helping them prepare for this war that was gonna come. And the ceasefire that was in place between the Karen and the Burma army was already starting to break. And there was already like fighting, but the two governments weren't acknowledging that it was happening. So one step back on the sort of war in Burma. So Burma has been at war since the end of World War II. It's the world's longest running civil war. It's been going for 70 years.
Can we pull it up on a map, Alessi, for people so
Yeah.
that they can follow along? But please continue, Ephraim.
So since when the British left at the end of World War II, basically the ethnic Burmese who control the center of the country, their army, which actually sided with the Japanese originally during the beginning of the war, they switched sides when they realized the Japanese were losing, and they fought alongside the British. And so then the British basically left them in charge with all the weapons and guns.
Oh,
so
nice.
that's to be clear, this is very much an oversimplification, but that's basically what happened. And so now the Burma army controls the country. So imagine if the U.S. military came in and were like, "Yeah, we're getting rid of the police force, we're getting rid of Congress, we're getting rid of the president,
Right.
and the general." General Mark Milley or Petraeus or whoever.
What could go wrong?
He is now in charge,
Yeah,
right?
nothing could go wrong.
What could possibly go wrong? So the guy who's in charge of Burma is a guy named General Miao Lai. And
General what?
Miao Lai. Miao Lai, yeah.
Sounded like meow meow.
Meow, pretty close, yeah. Yeah, dude, he's, not a fan. So anyway, he is the general of the army, and they control the country to an extent. And they, unfortunately, they are using sort of racial tensions to divide people and try to divide and conquer. So on the outskirts of Burma, there's about a dozen, there's more than this, but let's say about a dozen major tribes that live in the border regions of Burma. And the Burmese are traditionally from the sort of central part of the country. So the central Burma army, they are trying to conquer all the ethnic minority tribes and all that ensues and all that implies. So there's genocide, mass rape, forcing children into the army, drugs. The Burma army soldiers are taking drugs. That's a whole other story. It's nuts. I've seen it. And so the entire country is basically in a civil war. Back in a couple years ago, there was a sort of a fake government that was set up to where the Burma army was like, all right, we're going to make moves toward democracy, but it was fake. It wasn't real. They still controlled this fake Congress and stuff that they set up in a constitution. So they do all this stuff just to sort of show the world like, oh yeah, we're making moves toward democracy. And so sanctions were lifted, were eased against the Burma army. So they used that to build up their strength and build up their army. And then they continued to attack people. So in 2017, they pushed out just under 1 million Rohingya Muslims from the western part of the country. And that was because the Rohingya Muslims didn't have any weapons to defend themselves. All the other ethnic tribes did have weapons to defend themselves. So
It's ethnic cleansing.
it's ethnic cleansing. It's genocide, ethnic cleansing, all of that. And so the thing that's different is a couple of years ago, the Burmese or the Burma army, they basically got rid of all the fake pretense of the government anyway. They got rid of the fake pretense of this fake government that was in place. But that pissed everybody off. That pissed off even the people who had supported the Burma army in the past. They were like, no, we were moving toward democracy. What are you doing? So they actually bought the lie themselves. And so then when the Burma army got rid of it, they were like, all right, cool. Now we see you guys. Now we see you for who you really are. And so now the entire country is in like full blown civil war. It's not just the ethnic minority groups; it's the people in the center of the country now want the military gone. And so the war, which has been extremely violent for decades, is now reached a fever pitch, and it's much, much worse.
How's it being fought? Is it being fought like that village to village type style, where it's just random pockets here and there, just here and there, all over the place, shooting each other? Like what does it look like on the ground?
So what it sort of looks like is the different ethnic minority groups who have their own territory. They're trying to push the Burma army out from those territories. So the Burma army, they fight sort of like a conventional army. So they go and they're the ones setting up the outposts deep in an area that they're trying to control. They're the ones that run the patrols. So they use the same tactics that we used in Afghanistan, for example. I'm going to be very clear, not the rape and the genocide and the murder. Okay, I'm going to be very clear on that. But as far as like military tactics,
yes,
the Burma army, they're the ones with body armor and helmets and outposts and machine guns and air support. So they're sort of a conventional army. That's how they're trying to control the country. But all the ethnic minority groups, they're all sort of guerrilla groups, and they're trying to get rid of the Burma army from their territory. And so since over the last couple of years, since they call it the coup, all these ethnic minority groups are all fighting at the same time. And so now the Burma army, for the first time, is really losing some territory and really taking it on the chin and is against the ropes and is slowly losing territory as this is being fought. So what used to just sort of be guerrilla tactics, trying to stop Burma army convoys from coming in to massacre a village and the villagers kind of run away. Now it's like the guerrilla groups, they're all getting together in large numbers and attacking the Burma army outposts to try to overrun them and get them out of there and knocking out the convoys and that stuff. So it's like a full-blown, almost, it's still a guerrilla war, but it's approaching more of a conventional war in a way because the numbers are so big.
Before we get to what you're doing on the ground, just from like a geopolitical standpoint here, trying to analyze it, do you see, I mean, you're talking about a war that's basically been going on since World War II, as you said. I mean, that's insane to me. That's like 4 generations. But
yeah,
do you see an end in sight?
I think potentially in the next 3 to 4 years, we could see the Burma army gone. I think that's possible. Again,
3 to 4 years. Oof.
Yeah, it's so the Burma army, they're just consolidating their forces and just getting tighter packed, and nobody from the outside is really helping. I think the Chinese are helping in some areas a little bit. The U.S. isn't helping at all. And so the Burma army, they will lose a lot of territory over the next few years, and they're going to sort of consolidate their power in the cities. And so we'll see sort of what breaks at that point if the different groups are able to overrun the Burma army. So it's going to take time, and it's thousands and thousands more people are going to die before the Burma army are gone. Now, in the meantime, once the Burma army's gone, now there's a power vacuum. There's people who in certain parts of the country are used to getting millions of dollars from drugs, and there's hydroelectric power, and there's an oil pipeline that goes from there to China.
Oh, that's nice.
There's lots of different complications there, and so you could end up having some of these groups fighting each other as well. So the place is going to be very unstable for a very long time.
Well, there's a question actually. This is something we see in all kinds of different conflict zones across the world, obviously, but you're talking about a country on the map here. If we can pull that up for 1 sec, you got it there, Alessi. So Burma is basically almost basically smack dab in between India and China, 2 enormous world powers. There's a pipeline, as you said, going to China. As an example, the way it has been explained to me by people smarter than me about this stuff, North Korea, essentially, and all the horrible shit he does there, is allowed to exist because of China. Like, they let that happen. They could stop that at any point, but they're like, there's some sort of economic ties there. Has that been the case in Burma as well? There
are definitely some ties between the Chinese. So my personal 2 cents on the situation is the Chinese are willing to sort of work with whoever's actually in control of Burma. They want to make sure that the oil continues to flow. They want to make sure that the hydroelectric power continues to go. They've got development projects that they've invested in. So they don't. My just 2 cents on it, and I could be totally wrong on this, but I don't think the Chinese really care who's in charge as long as they get along with them. So some of the tribes up in the far north are actually being backed by the Chinese. The Chinese are giving them technology and weapons and drones and different things like that to attack Burma Army positions. Because there's also a lot of rare earth minerals and mines. Burma is, okay, imagine a country that's mineral rich and has all these resources that's basically been untouched for 70 years, right? All the other countries after World War II, have been mined and all that kind of stuff. Burma has not. I mean, there's gold and emerald and hydroelectric power and timber.
Yeah, where's
and
your
rice.
Rolex, bro? Come on.
Yeah, I'm in the wrong business. Exactly. Yeah, this is my $65 Timex from Target.
I know you got that money hidden in the backyard. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. So it's like so it's a place that there's a lot of resources there that the world needs and wants. So China's definitely backing some of the groups, but they're not backing other portions of the groups. The Burma Army also has a lot of deals with all the different countries along the border. So the Burma Army, because they control the supply routes, they control the borders, they're moving drugs, they're moving whatever they want to move.
Wow.
Yeah, so they call it, it's basically a form of crystal meth. The big one there is a form of crystal meth called yaba, and that's what they call it. And it's like a pill, you put it on your tongue, and the Burma Army soldiers will actually take this crystal meth. So it's sort of like the German military did during World War II.
Yeah.
Just like the Nazis. Yeah, isn't it amazing? Like all the bad guys, they're like, yeah, we're gonna have our soldiers do drugs.
Meth.
Yeah, meth is the answer. Meth is the answer. Yeah, but it makes their soldiers in combat, makes them fearless, makes them hold the line, makes them aggressive. They get shot and they keep going, and but it's very, very common. So anytime like the local guerrilla forces take a small outpost or something, there's just a bunch of crystal meth in there in the form of these yaba pills.
And like you're saying, this is so deeply entrenched for so long. It's like the cartels with Mexico, different setup, but they've been there so long. They and the government are one and the same, right? Mm-hmm. And that's essentially what you have here with the military. They're the cartel themselves. They have these deals with other countries who, let's be honest, they don't give a shit what happens to the people in there. It's all just economics for
sure. Yeah,
that's what a clusterfuck of a situation.
Yeah. Now imagine the drug. Let's continue on with the Mexico analogy. So let's say the Mexican government or let's say the Mexican military controlled Mexico, and they were the ones making drugs, right? And now let's say that they were selling drugs to the United States right on their northern border. And then all the people in Mexico rise up because and they're selling drugs directly to the U.S. government, right? Imagine that, right? And now the people of Mexico rise up to try and get rid of the military, which has all this money and stuff and has fighter jets from America, right? And they're trying to rise up and overthrow this military. Well, that's how intertwined this stuff is. Like now the U.S. military is like, we've given you fighter jets and we have major, billion-dollar drug deals that we're doing with you on an annual basis. It makes things complicated. It makes things really, really murky. And so as the locals are starting to win, things are getting really, really complicated. The Chinese are backing like little groups here, little groups there. I really don't know what China's like actual backroom policy is on Burma, but yeah, it's the place is the Wild West at this point.
Now, what are you guys doing there? Because that's where we began. Obviously, you guys have now been on the ground there for years, because it starts with this kind of like re-engagement on your part to where you get the opportunity to get called in. But like, what's happening in Burma for you?
So the organization I run, like I said before, is called Stronghold Rescue and Relief. And our primary focus in Burma is to do frontline mentorship with security forces that are trying to protect civilians from this ethnic cleansing and genocide and things like that, showing them basically how to use what they already have and bringing in like communications, different things like that can help them. We put in a lot of early warning systems, Starlinks, radios, and in these different villages and things, so villagers know which way to run when these attacks come, all this different stuff. So we invest a lot into that, and we spend months on the ground living and working with these people, doing everything we can to make sure that they are capable of taking care of themselves when the next attempted genocide comes. Now, the war's changed a lot because now these guys are fighting back a lot more. So now we've really rolled into doing tons of medical support. And so in East Burma, we run the only actual ambulances in East Burma. And unless I think we can pull this up on screen too. We had the video of the ambulance driving across the river. If we could pull that up on our. on our Instagram.
Oh yeah, good call. Because we got to make sure there's no
The other stuff is
blood
censored.
and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Okay, great.
So this is where?
So this is in Burma. This is in eastern Burma, and this is just one of our ambulances crossing a river a few weeks ago. And so we have these souped up Hiluxes with medical supplies in the back, and these are the only ambulances that are evacuating people. So we're talking women stepping on landmines, soldiers getting shot, pregnant women having complications. They have no way to get to the rudimentary clinics that are in Burma, like very, very, very few. There's another really great NGO that has a really good clinic, and but it's deep in the jungle. And what would normally take someone 4 days to walk, we can get them in 4 hours now with one of these trucks.
All right, let's play this real fast. Go ahead, Les.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So for people who are listening, you see this.
It's a monster.
Yeah, you see this Hilux pickup truck driving through this river. We got chains on the tires. We got snorkels, winches on these things. Yeah, and you're going up, that engine's almost going completely under the water. And that's these people's only hope. If we don't have that vehicle there, those people do not cross that river, or they have to get carried across that river. And there's patients in the back of that vehicle, in the back of the ambulance there. So we're transporting hundreds of people at this point every year. We have four full-time ambulances plus an ambulance boat as well that transports people. There's this huge man-made lake from a dam that was built by the Burma Army that swallowed up 100 square miles of ethnic territory, of course. So anyway, we do these medical evacuations, but what's really cool about these ambulances is they are run by the locals. So these are refugees, people who've lost their villages, lost their homes, and it's their own tribe that's under attack, and they're the ones running the ambulances. Keep in mind, they've never had ambulances before in their life. And so our policy when it comes to helping in these places, I call it charity with dignity. And we're going to help you. We're not going to give you a handout. We're going to give you a hand up. I keep my teams extremely small. So it's no more than 4 Westerners on a mission at a time. Because if you start adding in tons and tons of people, you're now just doing everything for the locals, and they're not learning the skills. And it's it's not sustainable over the long term. If I wanted to, I could put out an email and we could get 50 people who'd be willing to go to Burma to drive.
No.
But no, that's not what I need. It's these people now have a job. They have a skill set. The local government and village leaders, now they're learning how all this stuff works.
Yeah.
And now this is hopefully forever. They'll have ambulances, and we put in the very, very first ones in Eastern Burma.
Yeah, it's a hard dance, guys. You gotta manage there where you're doing something amazing, especially if you get a public platform, you start talking about it, righteously so. There's so many people out there who are oh my God, I want to help. And I love that. I love hearing that.
Me as well. Yeah.
But one example, a really good friend of mine, Paul Rosalie, who's been on this podcast now 3 times, when he was first blowing up with the first episode we did, so many people were saying, he's in the middle of the Amazon jungle, basically trying to protect it from the loggers and gold miners and all that. It's incredible work he does. I was just down there with him in May for 11, 12 days, and it was really eye-opening. But, so many people hit him up and want to help. But, he has to say no to pretty much all of them, because it's similar to what you were talking about earlier. They think they're about that life, but they're really about that moment. And they're not even equipped to handle that moment. That's no disrespect to the people that want to help, but he's sitting here going, honestly, the best way most people can help is you keep donating so that we can buy up the acreage, which, that's exactly what they do. He owns 80,000 acres now down there. It's and has all of his park rangers patrolling it, who are native Peruvians who were born in the jungle and know absolutely every fucking thing you could know about that, right?
Exactly.
And he's I don't need cowboys down here.
Yep.
All due respect. It sounds like you're in a very similar position with the type of people that you're vetting. And I also kind of want to know, it sounds like you have both military and civilians going in there, under your team?
People who work for us?
Yeah.
So obviously nobody's active duty military.
Right. But
all of our frontline guys who actually go in to do the frontline mentorship and frontline we're training frontline medics, and we're there with them, showing them how to save people's lives in those situations. All of those guys are ex-military. Yeah.
Great.
And they're all either from special operations or special units of one kind or another. And again, it's a very small team. I don't send in tons and tons of people. The guys we have on the team, they're just absolutely stellar and extremely committed. They're about that life, as you say. And so we don't bring in civilians to sort of like do the work very much. We'll have a couple of admin people come in from time to time to help us with the organizing of the ambulances and things like that. My wife, actually, she's from the Karen tribe. So that's another crazy story.
Oh, you met her there?
I met her in the jungle, but I'll tell that in a second.
All right, let's tell that story when you get there. Yeah.
So we'll have people come in to help with that a little bit. We brought in, like, we were in Africa, we brought in a doctor to help us during that time in Africa. But for the most part, it's all ex-military guys. Because my vision for starting this was, I was like, hey, there's all these guys who are in the military and they have all this training and they're very frustrated because they want to help. There's no opportunity for them to help. And so I've created, a small thing, or it's a big thing, but it's I only have a few openings for jobs because I keep it, again, I have to keep things very small. But that's sort of the main goal. So my wife, crazy story how I met her. So I got off this like 2 or 3 week mission deep in the jungle in Burma. The Burma army was moving through this area and was like attacking these villages and such. So we were helping repel that and making sure that everyone was as safe as possible and dealing with the threat, we'll say. And so I get off of this mission, and the clinic that I was mentioning before, where we take our patients in the ambulances, I love going to the clinic because it's run by another Western NGO, and they actually have like warm blankets. They have dry blankets, and I was like, I want to get back there so I can like sleep under a hut instead of just in my tent and have a blanket. That would just be really, really nice because I've been sleeping in a hole for the last 3 weeks. So we travel through the jungle. It's raining. We travel across this lake. It's raining on us the whole time. And the guys of the team are like, hey, can we just stop at this village and like we'll get to this place tomorrow. We'll get to the clinic tomorrow. Like, no, we're getting there today. I was like, no, we're going there. I was like, we're already on I'm already wet. Like, let's just keep pushing through. Let's get there. So we get there late at night. It's like this, I don't know, like 13-hour travel day through the jungle. We get there. The next morning, we wake up, and one of my friends who works with the NGO, she was coming over to say hi to us. And then there was this little Asian lady with her who's Korean, and I was like, oh, she's cute. And then she started talking. The little Korean lady started talking, and I knew within like 5 seconds of her talking, I was like, if everything checks out, I'm going to marry this girl. So she spoke. So she spoke with perfect American like accent, and so come to find out, she's from the Karen tribe. She went to Thailand as a war refugee when she was a baby, so she was technically born on the Thai side of the border, and lived in a refugee camp until she was 10, and then her family randomly was able to get a visa, and so they went to Canada, and so she grew up in Canada, and so she had just come back to Burma to basically find a way to help, and so she was at that clinic because she was going to be teaching some English and some science to some of the medical students who were being trained there. And so, that's where we met, in the middle of the jungle.
Middle of the Burma jungle.
Yeah. And then, and that was it. And then we got married. So there was that. And the cool story.
Good for you.
Yeah, the cool thing is her dad actually works is from the same villages and the same area that I've been working in for years at that point. And they're from the same villages that I would go through, and have tons of mutual friends they have tons of mutual friends. So when I was like, oh yeah, I'm marrying. So when I told the tribal leaders, like, I'm marrying this girl, they're like, oh, that's the granddaughter of this guy and the son of this guy. Like, yeah, that's my best friend. And like, oh yeah, this is, he was like our tribal leader back in the day. And like, so, pretty cool. That's
cool. Really situation. Awesome.
Yeah.
And like, obviously in the middle of that happening though, you're in the middle of this war that's going on. I'm looking at a video like this. I'm seeing the work you do. I'm hearing about it from you as well, and I'm wondering, I gotta think you guys are in the crosshairs of the military, who probably doesn't like you? Like, how much of a threat? Like, have you guys had some serious close calls? Have you lost some people? Like,
I don't know if we can show this video, but it's up there on Instagram. It's on our Instagram. So I'll just tell the story. So the ethnic, so the Karen people that we were working with, they were doing a joint operation with one of the other like the tribal groups, and they were trying to take back this big town or medium-sized town from the Burma army. And so during this battle, we were there. So it was like urban combat, and we were there maybe 150, 200 yards behind, like the very, very front. And we had a casualty collection point set up, and we had some medics there. And there were three white guys there, myself and two other guys. And as the fighting happens, civilians, of course, they start to leave the city. And so as they're leaving the city, somebody who was a sympathizer with the Burma army, as soon as they got out of there, they found a cell phone tower or whatever. They called the Burma army and said, hey, in this particular building, there's 3 white dudes.
oh boy.
So we don't know that this is happening, of course. Now, the Burma army, they have fighter jets and bombers and drones and all that stuff. So at the time, on that particular day of the battle, I actually started getting pretty sick. I had like a fever. So I was in this building. I laid down. There were 2 other guys that were with me. They were also laid down. We were just kind of like just relaxing between, patients and things like that. And we didn't realize this was happening, but basically the Burma army, they cut all the cell phone towers. They sent 3 fighter jets on a totally different flight path. So these fighter jets would come in and they would bomb, where they knew the forces were in the town. But we could always hear them coming, right? Because they were going to come in and they're going to bomb certain locations within the town. But they did an entirely different flight path to where we could not hear them coming. They came in low and fast from an entirely different direction after cutting the cell phone towers. So the first thing that we knew that we were being targeted was the roof blew off the building that I was in. So we're laying there on the ground, the windows and the roof and half the walls above us just blow up, just gone. So what the Burma army does is they'll bring in fighter jets, and they'll, actually I'm not gonna talk about that particular tactic that they use, just because, I'm just not gonna talk about that. Yeah. So anyway, so they came in, the bomb hit, blew off the rooftop, and the idea is to sort of wound everybody inside. And then they bring in the other bombs to kill anybody who's coming in to get the wounded, and anybody who's stuck, that's when they kill them. So the first bomb goes off. We luckily were all laying down at the time. And so the roof blows off, the walls blow out, the windows blow out. I look over at the guy next to me, Adam, and we're like, oh, all right, time to get out of here. So I literally grabbed my cell phone, because the only thing I was holding, I was wearing flip-flops at that exact moment too. And we run out of the building. We jump into a trench. And this is on video, so this is on our Instagram if people want to go check it out. The next fighter jet comes in and we hear it, and I just turned my phone on, just kind of put it up above my head, and then just got down in the trench.
Whoa.
The next fighter jet comes in, you hear the engine screaming, and it comes in, boom, hits the building, blows it up, right where we had just been sleeping or sitting 60 seconds earlier. And so we're in the trench, and then the third jet comes in, boom, hits the building again. They had every intention of just killing us.
Yeah.
And so then we start, so actually at this point, I'm sorry, I was not wearing my flip-flops. I was barefoot. I ran out of the building barefoot.
Even better.
So we had to run out of this area because these airstrikes are coming in, and now we know the aircraft are going to come back and they're going to start strafing with machine guns. So we run out of the area, the aircraft start coming in and start strafing where we had just been with machine guns. So I'm running barefoot through like broken glass and like rubble of this village in the middle of the jungle. And we get out of there, these airstrikes come in and all that stuff. And all of our gear was completely blown up. Everything was blown up. So luckily, one of the guys went back into the rubble after the airstrikes had stopped, and they found my bag. It had a bunch of holes in it, but my passport was good to go. My wallet was good to
Thank
go.
God.
So I was like, okay, very cool. So I had that, but everything else was blown up. I had no shoes. Yeah, so that was very, very, very close call.
These are this is my point though. These are the kinds of threats that you do this great work under though, you know, and while that war's, you just said you're hopeful it could end in 3 or 4 years. I mean, that's a lot of time, and a lot of desperate war measures that could be taken between now and then. I hope you guys stay as careful as you can over there. It's amazing work. It's just like, I hope people at home, I mean, I'm sure you can understand like the stakes that you're putting yourself in the middle of at all times. It's truly incredibly courageous, man.
Yeah, and then that goes back to that whole, you got to be about the life, not about the moment.
Yep.
And you know, so for me, right now, I'm like I said, I'm knocking out this master's at Harvard, and part of the reason I said yes to it when I got it was I was like, I need a breather, because I could feel my own sort of sanity slipping away a little bit. I was like, man, it just so much going on. I need a breather. And so the thing is though, like even during Christmas break, like I'm going to be back over there, you know, helping and working and stuff. And then as soon as I'll get back to, you know, Cambridge a couple of days before classes start again, you know, and that's my intention. And then also I won't go to the graduation either. I'll just go
straight there.
Yeah. As soon as exams are done, next day back over there. Yeah. Cause we have to be over there before the rain starts at the end of May. So, yeah, so that's sort of
and that's where your focus is right now in Burma specifically.
Yeah, primarily Burma. We've got a team going into Malawi next month to work with anti-poaching park rangers. Yeah, so there's civilians in these communities that are caught in the middle of these.
Where was that?
What's that?
Where was that?
Malawi. In Africa, yeah. So we do small missions, small temporary missions to other places as well. And the larger we get, we'll be able to put in more permanent stuff. We've done stuff in Haiti. We were in Israel right after the October 7th attacks up in northern Israel, helping the Israeli people with medical support and stuff like that, and just bringing in a ton of medical supplies. And so we're, you know, in these abandoned neighborhoods because all the Israeli civilians had to leave, and then the IDF. They're sitting there firing artillery back into Lebanon as Hezbollah's firing rockets and, you know, hitting the area around us, and Hezbollah fighters are jumping the wall. Yep. So we were pretty close to that. I was in Kyiv as the Russians were advancing on Kyiv. We were helping.
You were there.
I was there. Yeah. So we went in after the invasion started, and I went into Kyiv to help basically prepare the medical situation there. And then basically there was civilians who had never, you know, they'd never been in war ever. And one guy was talking to us, and he was like sort of like crying as he was telling us about it. He's like, I don't want to fight in a war. He's like, I'm a graphic designer, you know? And we're like, hey man, like we got you. And we just, you know, we're kind of like helping prepare them for what was coming. Thank God the Russians stopped and turned around. So that's good. I was very happy about that. But yeah.
Where you mean like where you were?
So we were in Kyiv. The Russians were advancing on the outskirts of Kyiv. They were in like northern Kyiv. So I never personally dealt directly with the Russians. I never was like under direct fire from them.
You're saying at the beginning they moved tactically.
The Russians came in from the north and were pushing through northern Kyiv. So they were in these neighborhoods called Bucha and Irpin in particular, which is where all the mass rapes and the mass genocide and slaughter of civilians happened. It was those Russian troops that were in Bucha and Irpin. So it's sort of like a suburb of northern Kyiv. I was in like central Kyiv, waiting for the Russians to get to that point. So we were helping prepare for the Russians getting to that point. So that's when I say luckily the Ukrainian military stopped them, and then the Russians turned around and went back north to Belarus, and so we didn't have to be involved in anything, which I was very grateful for.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.